Again, thank you. This is Victoria with the ACR, the NRDR division, and today we're presenting the exam name mapping tool. It's used to assign an RPID value. RPID is short for Red Lex Playbook ID, and those values are necessary for matching the exam names that come from your scanners to an ID that is provides a common language so that we can compare exams one to another. What I'd like to do is walk you through each scenario possible and explain it as I go. In order to get started with the exam name mapping, of course, you would have to have data in your facility at that time. Data begins at your scanner or PACS and then is forwarded from those devices to the RPID installation. If you have a proper RPID installation, it will pass along data fields from the DICOM header to our central server. And our central server will then parse that data and deposit it into your facility ID, which is unique. If you see here, I am at the NRDR portal, and at the very top in the web address, you'll see that I am at the NRDR portal where you can log in and check your data. We suggest that you log in and check your data no less than each quarter of the year, which is right around the time we start to aggregate reports. And we would like for you to look at your data right before we begin to aggregate reports so that you have the most accurate and robust report possible for that quarter of the particular year that we're aggregating data. All right, so I have selected then, I am the registry administrator for my test account. This is a live production account that we use for these demos. So what you'll see here is exactly what you'll see when you do this for yourself. So this is test data. And then my username, of course, and then login. So I'm going to go ahead and log into my facility. And often when I log in, it takes me over to the home page for my facility, and you may notice this at the very top. It says ACR NRDR homepage. If you land here, just scroll down a little bit until you see the DIR, and then click on that to launch the DIR submenu. You'll notice that the menu is much shorter. It's about half the length of the full NRDR homepage. So these are links that pertain just to the DIR registry. Once you're at this submenu, scroll down more than halfway. There are two links that I want to show to you that pertain to exam name mapping. We do provide a user guide. In the user guide, you can either reference it while online, or you can, of course, print it and go through the different sections together. What I'm going to do is essentially go through this particular user guide.
Victoria, I'm going to interrupt you for a minute. I don't think that the screen is moving.
Oh, let's try it. All right, just a second. All right, let's see. Trying that again.
I can see the RPID exam name mapping webinar screen now.
Okay. Do you see the cursor moving?
No.
No. Okay, just a second. Screen. No, that's not what I want.
I see the
Okay,
facility at
great,
NRDS screen.
great, great. Wonderful.
Yes, I can see the cursor moving now.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Okay,
Oh,
great. Thank you.
great. Thank you. Thank you for letting me know that. I think most of you know how to log in your facility. So that was really a review of just how to log in and get to the mapping tool. So again, the mapping tool then is located on the DIR registry submenu, and it's more than halfway down. We do have a user guide that you can click on in order to reference this same material. I'm essentially going to abbreviate my webinar today using the user guide just in small notes so that we can go through and perform these demos. Now, in order to launch the actual exam name mapping tool, you'll need to click on exam name mapping from that link on the submenu. Once that happens, you'll get a screen that looks like this. It's blue. And I want to bring to your attention some of the easiest ways to look at your data or the exam names that's within this tool. The first thing I tend to look at are the navigation tools. The first one is the at a glance row. The next navigation tool would be the status bar with the drop-down menu. And everything on the drop-down menu is also available in the at a glance bar. And then there's the alphabetical. Alphabetical is helpful if you're looking for a particular exam that you know begins with an A, and this is what I mean. CT, abdomen, pelvis. Though the exam is an abdomen, the first letter in the series is actually a C. So if you're looking for abdomen and your exam names are written with CT preceding abdomen, it's really going to fall under C and not A. So it's really going to depend on how your protocol names are written in the study description field of your DICOM header. A question that I get quite a bit, and I'll answer this now, is can these names be changed once they're received? No, they cannot. This is exactly the way it appears in your DICOM header in the study description field. And this is exactly the way it's received, and this cannot be edited. And we do have this tool so that it can be mapped to an RPID value to standardize language so that we can use these exam names, even though they're very, very different from one another, into comparisons. So to start again, I like using the at a glance tool. It shows me from left to right, and it actually kind of guides me left to right on what it is I really want to do. I want to take the exam names that are not tagged and make sure they end up further right, which is tagging completed or guidance or unwanted. These are the fields that I try to make sure these particular exam names move into. If I want to start off by looking at my not tagged exams, I can click on the hypertext link and scroll down a little bit. You'll notice that the status column will list only the not tagged exam names. I'm going to do a demo on how to locate and map an RPID for our first exam. Put a check mark next to the exam that you want to map to an RPID. We've got the abdomen with and without contrast. Scroll to the very bottom and there are 3 blue buttons. The one on the left says Search RPID. That's what we want to do. We don't want to take a look at either of these right at the moment, but we will later. First off, though, we want to search for an RPID that's already in the database. The top half of the box helps to refine our search options. And you'll see there are many predicate and value options available here to choose from in order to refine your search. In the lower half of the box are the top 10 suggested RPID values or codes. The first column here is a code, and the next column, of course, is the short name. The short name is the standardized name for that particular code. So even if your exam name doesn't match it exactly, the artificial intelligence within the software itself will try and find a match to the sequence of letters in the exam name. And that is how the top 10, and then of course 20 and 30 and 40, you can see at the bottom pages 2, 3, and 4, and 5, and so on, populate in the lower half of this search box. If we look through these and they are not specific enough and simply want an abdomen with without contrast, without having to sort through all the short names and find it and locate it or page through them at the bottom, which can be long, we can go up here and refine our search. I like to start with body region. If you click inside the white space, you'll get some options here that you can scroll through and select. Our exam is for the abdomen, so I'm going to select abdomen and then click on the white space to maintain that selection. I also know that my study is with and without, and I want to go over here and then specify even greater granularity with IV contrast and see what options are available to me there. I do know from experience that we do have a without and then with IV contrast. So I'm going to keep that one, and between these two, I'm going to see if I can search and refine my search even more so I can find just the abdomen with and without. Additionally, we've got a lot of pelvis in here and angios, and we still don't quite have the abdomen with and without contrast. What we can do then is see if it might be lying on the next page, and it is. Oops, let me highlight this. So we've got a CT abdomen with and without IV contrast, which is an RPID 4. I want this. So what I do is I click in the radio button to assign it. So I come down here to the blue button and click Assign RPID. I'm going to get a confirmation box up here, which simply states RPID assigned successfully. Status has been changed to tagging completed. Now remember, we are trying to work left to right. I want to move the not tagged into tagging completed or guidance or unwanted. There's also a possibility here that if you're interested in mapping many at the same time, and I have to do a little pretending here in order to do this. I have to pretend that these are just variations on the same theme, that there's an abdomen pelvis with contrast. And these 3 are abdomen, or I can just click that, abdomen pelvis with contrast. And if that's the case, or if there's one down here, another abdomen with pelvis, I'm sorry, I'm clicking CTA, but again, I think you'll understand. If you get a lot of abdomen pelvis and they're entered into the study description field just slightly differently. They appear as new exam names. So even if it's off by one letter or one character or one space, it comes across as a new exam name and you do have to map it. So you can do multiple mappings this way of identical exam names. So I clicked on 3 and the same thing occurs here. You search RPID and I'm looking for an abdomen pelvis, and it's in this scenario I'm just going to say that it's without IV contrast and then search, and it's narrowed my options down considerably. And I think I'm going to go ahead and just stay with the abdomen pelvis without IV contrast, which is the first code, the 1842. I want to stop here for just a second and acknowledge that this is a pediatric short name. It's okay if you don't map your PEDS to a pediatric code, as we use the information you've provided to us from the DICOM field, a different DICOM field. If you send us the date of exam, of course, we do receive that, but you also send us the date of birth, we're able to calculate the age of the patient at the time the exam was performed. So with the age, we can then sort the exams into either adult or pediatric for your for your quarterly aggregate reports. So even if you miss this in your mapping and you have a pediatric but you didn't select pediatric RPID, don't worry. We'll go ahead and use the other 2 data fields to determine the age and then map it accordingly to make sure that your patients who are pediatric are compared to other pediatric patients as well, regardless of whether or not you're using a pediatric RPID. So I wanted to put your fears to rest on that one. So I'm going to assign an RPID here, and again, it's telling me the status is being changed and it's being moved over to the tagging completed. I'm just going to say okay. And because I'm using the at a glance bar and I've highlighted and clicked on not tagged, when the fields change, or I'm sorry, when the status changes from not tagged to tagging completed, this number increases as this number decreases. So again, my logic is to work left to right from not tagged, from not tagged to tagged. I think I just got rid of that. Just a moment. There we go. So go from here to here. I want to discuss the other fields that are available before we start actually assigning them. There's tagging in process. I'll explain that. It's a little confusing, so I'll explain it a couple of times throughout, just maybe to reinforce. Tagging suggested, tagging completed. This is where I really would prefer all of your tagging to be if these are diagnostic exams and not guidance studies or outside reads that are really not your studies and you can map them to the unwanted. So the bulk of your, the bulk of your exam name mapping should end up in this particular category with the, a few exceptions. And then guidance studies, I think, kind of speaks for itself. This is here if you would like to, it's for you, essentially. It's not for us as within the ACR to sort the guidance studies for you if you don't want to. You can go ahead and put all your guidance studies into one category. It serves to get them out of the not tagged, but also so they're not dumped into an unwanted category. I think some of our facilities kind of like having the option to have the guidance studies over here and out of the way, but still accessible. And then unwanted, again, might be those studies That might be some of your drainage studies. They could be, again, as I said, outside reads. And an outside read, by our definition, would be like a patient who comes in with a CD in her hand, and she had her study performed elsewhere, but is bringing it in for the radiology to review. So those may come across if you're sending data from your PACS. Of course, if you're sending your data directly from a scanner, we won't get those outside reads. But we know that this happens, and we want to give you a place to just push exam names and get them out of the way, so that way what you're really working with are these true diagnostic exams to make sure that they're mapped properly. So that is the at-a-glance row navigation tool. I'm going to go ahead and use the status for now to show drop down for now to show everything, so that we can review the tagging in process and how exams end up here. Tagging in process starts when you have an exam name that might be unusual. Now, some unusual exams for this particular scenario, it means that the RPIDs are not available yet. There might not be an RPID value that's been created for your particular exam, and you may not be performing too many of these exams as yet, and there may not be a lot of these in circulation throughout the United States as well. So an RPID value may not have been created for that particular exam, but you want to go ahead and keep it. So what we do then is provide you with an option to build your own mapping. It allows you to choose your own predicates and values. Let me go back and start that again so that you know what I just did. I apologize. If you have an exam that is not mapped, I'm going to go over here and use this and do not tagged. So if you have one that's not tagged, and it, again, as I said, you've not been able to find an RPID for it, you can then put a check mark beside that and then build out your own mapping, choosing the different predicate values and then tag and save them. So I'm working with an abdomen aorta, and I'm going to click inside the box for predicate and see if I can focus on the largest possible region, which would be the body region. We know that it's an abdomen. It gives us several options here if we click in values. Currently, I'm just going to stay with the body region of abdomen, and then I'm going to click tag and save so that the predicate and value appears in the lower box. Then I'm going to go to the very back, to the very top, and again in the predicate box, and see if I can try and find something more granular. So for me, the second predicate I look for is then the anatomic focus. And here we're looking for aorta, so perhaps we can find aorta, and there it is. So I've selected again a second predicate and value, and I click on add tag and save. If I wanted to, I could go back through these additional predicates and values and try and make this a little more granular if needed. If I truly needed to make this as granular as possible, I could do so and then continue to add that into the predicate and values at the very bottom. Once I've decided that this is as granular as I need it to be, aorta, abdomen, and ECG gated, I can then click out of the build your own mapping box by using the red X at the top. build your own mapping then disappears from the not tagged box and ends up over here in tagging in process. The tagging in process, as you'll notice, will list all the RPID predicates and values that your facility has selected in order to describe a particular exam name. What happens to this from here on out is a process that extends beyond the ACR. This tool, the exam name mapping tool, is developed and maintained by the RSNA, and they meet weekly, usually, to review the mapping and tagging and the different predicates that are available or not available within their mapping tool. So once this is built out, once you've added the predicates and values for the build your own mapping, it gets sent to them digitally for review. It takes them approximately 90 days to respond, so they will review your predicates and values, and then they will respond with an RPID. So if there's an ID that they've already created, they will respond, and by doing so, it's referred to then as tagging suggested. So when they respond digitally, they will suggest an RPID. If they build out a new ID, which is not common, I want you to understand this, they usually build out 2 to 3 new RPIDs a year. So there's a good chance they aren't going to build out a new one for you. What they'll do is then suggest one that already exists. And once they've replied, this is where you'll find the reply in tagging suggested. I want to go over a little one additional reason why tagging suggested is also important. As I mentioned in the earlier part of the webinar, the RSNA has embedded within the software, their software tool, artificial intelligence, which can read the sequence of letters in the exam name as it comes through the DICOM header as we receive it. This sequence then is read by the software, and then the more common sequences then are mapped to or suggested a mapping to an ID that already exists. So for this particular CT orbit with contrast, the software went ahead and aligned it or mapped it to an RPID of 44 CT head orbits with IV con. If you feel as though this is a suggested RPID that you want to retain, and you can click that in the box and come to the very bottom with the blue buttons again, and you can check on or click Mark Selection Tagging Completed. And I'm going to do that for now. You'll also notice to the left of it is Mark All Tagging Suggested as Tagging Completed. If you have read through these, I'm just going to scroll to the top again. If you've read through these, pelvis with contrast and pelvis with IV contrast, and you've read through them and you agree, here's sinus with contrast, head sinuses with IV contrast, and you agree to these assignments as they were suggested by the AI, you can then do Mark All Tagging Suggested as Tagging Completed, and then everything gets moved from this category. Tagging suggested then is now dropped down to 0, and then it's moved over to tagging completed. This tool was created, or the software embedded within the tool was created to help make it easier on end users such as yourself to map and tag exams without having to go through every single one manually. So that's the dual purpose for tagging suggested. For tagging completed, we can, at the very end, I can demonstrate for you how to change and remove a tag. That's very, very simple, so I'll come to that at the very end. Unwanted. This is the only one that you cannot assign through actually singularly accepting and selecting over here on the left-hand side. So if you have an exam, I'm going to go over to not tag so I can just pick any exam I want. And I've got an exam that I simply don't want. I know that it's an outside read. I want to move it over to the unwanted section. I can't do it this way. I have to do it through what we call a batch import export. I'm sorry, batch export and then import. It won't work this way. So the second way to assign an RPID then is to export all to Excel. So everything within the mapping tool, no matter what its status, will then export to an Excel document. And what you can do is do all of your mapping here, not just unwanted. You see here we already have one that's unwanted. It was previously mapped, so it's showing here. But you can also map your other exams that are diagnostic in nature, so upper extremity, you can map those too, and just by typing in the RPID value. If you have a lot of these for extremity, you'll know the values through just doing a search, and the value will come up in the next column. But if, for example, I don't want this one to be mapped to a diagnostic RPID, I want it mapped and moved aside to the unwanted RPID, I know it's an outside read, I can go ahead and change that here. The RPID for unwanted, you'll see has a space, a dash. So it's RPID dash UW for unwanted. For guidance studies, I'm just going to highlight this, make it a little easier to read. For drainage or guidance studies that you want to move into the guidance category, as I was showing you here, you'll also have to do that through the Excel. So guidance and unwanted both have to be accomplished through the Excel spreadsheet. Here, well, I'll just delete it and then show you. If I want to, I would type in RPID 00. So any guidance study is a 00, no dash. Any unwanted is a dash UW. And then you would save this file, and I often save them to my, thank you, my favorites, which is my laptop, desktop. And it just makes it easy for me to find. And so don't change the name of the file. It's got today's date in it, or the current day's date, and just leave it there. To import it, you will then have to locate it. So choose File, and then go and look for the file with today's date, 5th, and it's going to ask you to then upload. So we're going to upload. And I do want to proceed. So, okay. And it's going to give me a status box as soon as the upload is complete. The upload result, I simply want to share with you two things. If you notice here, the total number of records tagging completed successfully really is referring to a category, meaning the categories of not tagged or tagging in process, tagging completed, and unwanted and guidance. This particular upload result box doesn't have guidance and unwanted as tagging categories. So that is why this is showing as 0. It was not moved, the exams that we tagged weren't moved into tagging completed. They were moved into guidance and unwanted. So I'm going to X out of this in just a minute. You don't have to do anything. But the second thing I want to show you here is that the total number of records for invalid RPID or improper syntax are 16. And this usually refers to tagging in process where the exams are actually built, where we did the build your own mapping and we chose body regions and we chose the different descriptors that we needed in order to provide, contextual background for the predicates and values. So if you wish to, you can update any invalid records, and it might take one or two off your list, but mainly it's what it's looking at are these RPIDs, predicates, and values, and whether they're mapped to an actual legitimate ID number or short name. And of course, because they're pending, they're not. It's just a way of looking at the exams and looking at their status. And it's understood that these are not going to be valid until there's an ID. All right, so I'm going to just click out of this box and go back here and indicate before we end that unwanted and guidance, these numbers don't change until the following day. The procedure has to go through, because it's different, it's an upload. The procedure then has to go through a set of codes at night that updates this feature, and then the differences are showed by the next morning. So because we can't assign them directly, but it's a little indirect through an import-export function, it's updated by the following day. So not to be alarmed if these values don't change until 24 hours. All right, before we close out, I wanted to go to tagging completed and demonstrate how we can change or remove a tag. And again, I promised you it would be pretty simple. So here we go. We put a check mark in this particular, just the first exam here. And it's currently mapped to an RPID 4, short name, abdomen, pelvis, with, without, ivy-con. And right here, as we put our cursor over the status change box, it says mark as not tagged. So we're going to do that. We're going to untag it. And it's going to remove it from view, and it's going to be over here in not tagged. Or, yeah, there we go. There we go. It's going to be over here and not tagged. Abdomen with, without contrast. And then we can go through the procedure again of selecting it and going to the very bottom and then searching for an RPID and then look for it and then assign it. So I'll do that one more time for you. Well, it's gotta, there we go. I'm just going to go over here and take a look at my list of tagging completed. Just clicked on that. And again, I'm just going to show you that you can check mark the box to the left to remove this tag, this RPID 5. All you do is move your cursor to the right, mark as not tagged, and there you go. It's now been moved from the tagging completed to the not tagged, and you can click on your not tagged and go in and retag it. That is the end of my demonstration. Please submit your questions in the question box, and Deborah Priya can read them out loud, and I will gladly answer them for you.
Okay, so we did not have questions. I just had two questions. One is on the exam description column, I can see that some of them look to be cut off. How can we see the full description name?
They shouldn't be cut off. I'm not certain of what the character limit is, and I can check on that. I'm not sure if we have, I'm certain it's not an unlimited character um, limit, but I think the study description field within the DICOM, I think it's 21 letters and spaces. I'll double check that, but that is limited by the DICOM header and not by the mapping tool. So if you need to, I can certainly get back to you on that and see what the limit is for that DICOM header. Any other questions?
Okay. So another question is from Crystal. She was asking you, could you specify the guidance, like provide an example? I think she asked this question before you started showing up, but Crystal, was that answered your question? Or did you want to see something else? Okay. Crystal says, I understand now, thanks. Okay.
Okay. Good.
Okay, so another question, what was the reason to export the files again?
The reason to export files, right. There's two things you can do with that. You can export files in order to map to guidance and unwanted, but you can also export if you wish to do all of your mapping that way. The mapping this way, I've heard from some facilities, they feel it's a little bit tedious to go through and read each and every one, but with the export, all of the exams are there to review at the same time, and so they can look at them and then assign an RPID in the Excel spreadsheet and then upload the entire thing as a batch, and then every RPID that has been assigned newly is then updated by the following day. And so from what I understand from a lot of facilities is they like that batch option so they can do all of their RPID at one time. So there's two reasons for using it. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, another question. How do you implement DIR for LCSR only? Does it have to be? I'm not sure about the question that Frank West asked. It is about how do you implement DIR for a LCSR only? Does it have to be in a flat file format? So this webinar is about mapping those index registry exams, and LCSR is different registry, and that's completely different. So you do not map LCSR. You cannot map any LCSR exams in DIR. But if your question is if you do a test city exam for screening purposes and whether you are going to map it in DIR or not, some people ask that. So you will just map that in DIR as other studies with like chest city without IV contrast or whatever you are doing. But to submit in LCSR as a flat file or other web services, whatever you choose as a method of submitting data in LCSR, you have to do it in LCSR registry. But if you still have questions about that, please submit a ticket to NRDR support.acr.org for faster response. Okay, so another question, when we map, should we do them under the master facility versus the child facility? And this is asked by Bill Chua. Yes, if you have a master-child relationship, you should map at the master facility level, and it will trickle down to all your child facility level. If you do not do that, your child facility mapping will not be retained. However, some facilities prefer that they map their exams at the child facility level, even if they are a master child, they are in a master-child relationship. In that case, please let us know so we can make an exception in our back end so that your child's facility mappings are retained. But there may be various reasons why facilities do that, but mapping at the master facility is way easier than mapping at a child facility levels, and most of the people who are master child, they do it that way. Okay, how do we permanently assign an exam to an RPID so we no longer will see the exam in not tagged? If I assign the abdomen, pelvis, with, without, with to the RPID, CT, abdomen, with, without, will it always go to that RPID from now on? So I am not sure if I am understanding your question. How do we permanently assign an exam to an RPID? I believe you are saying that whether once your tagging is completed, whether it will stay that way or not. And if that is the question, yes, that will stay. Once you map an exam and it says tagging completed, exam, all of your mappings will be retained. So it is not something that you do every day. So if you assign RPID to a study description, then every time you do that study, all of your exams going forward will be automatically mapped, and also your past exams. Why would you untag a study? Do you want to answer that, Victoria?
Yes. There are some facilities that would like to, and there might be new at tagging, so they'll select an RPID value initially that 6 months later they decide is not the best RPID value to use, so they'll untag it and then search for a more granular. That's often the answer that I get, is that the RPID is just not as granular as they want it to be, and so they go ahead and they select a different RPID.
And also, if you think like you mapped, sometimes it happens people map wrong. It is just a wrong mapping. You mapped CT abdomen chest, CT abdomen pelvis with exam in a CT abdomen pelvis without RPID. So, and in your report, you see that the number of exams you did in CT abdomen pelvis with is so less, and everything in CT abdomen without exam. And then you go back and say, oh, my exam numbers are not correct. And then you discover that your mapping is just wrong. So you untag your previous mapping and do it, remap that exam so that your mapping is correct. That is another reason people sometimes untag an exam. So another question, I have multiple accounts. Could I have one username and password to log on? And yes, you can. Now we are deploying that, right, Victoria? Do you remember when?
Yes, well, we hope to do the single login in about a week to 2 weeks, so it's not available yet, but when it is, we'll inform all of NRDR. We sent an email out to all of NRDR, I think it was about a week and a half ago, that it was up and coming for the single login. So it is still up and coming, but not available just yet. So under the circumstances, for Hugh, you do have to log in and out of each individual facility ID to map. But if you have multiple facility IDs that are related, like Deborah Priya just described as master child, you really should be doing your mapping at the master facility so that you don't have to log in and log out of each and every facility that you have. So log into the master and do your mapping there.
Okay. Now the next question, to clarify, this is from Crystal. Exporting files are the only way to tag as guidance and unwanted, correct?
That is correct.
I don't think so.
Yeah, that's the only way. Yes.
That is correct. Okay, sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now the question. Next question. Several RPIDs from RADLEX playbook have come back as not found. Is there a schedule for updating the DIR to reflect the RADLEX values?
I'm wondering if you're referring to the versions of RADLEX playbook. There are two versions. I think it's a 2.1 and 2.2. And they do update every now and again, but what we've done is we have retained the older version to accommodate the bulk of those in the DIR program who've been in it in the last many years, the last 8 years or so. So the new RPIDs, which there really aren't many, have not been integrated into our particular mapping tool. So for anyone who is using the DIR mapping tool as shown here, all the RPIDs that are in that particular version are available to use.
And I want to add to that, and this was a question by Anthony Blantica, Blantica, and so we are going to implement ACR Common, which is common mapping, and that will take care of many things, many annoying things like one study has multiple RPIDs. What is the difference between this RPID and that RPID to me? To me, both of the RPIDs look like they are for the same exam, and those kind of confusions that we encounter very frequently with RADLEX. Also, RADLEX, as Victoria mentioned, is maintained, and it is a Radiologic Society of North America, RSNA, maintained by them. We use that, but we are not the ones who maintain that. So we do not have much or any control, for that matter, on how the exam names are appearing there, not the exam names, but the RPIDs, and what RPIDs, why RPIDs are requested are not being added, and those kind of questions. So that will be taken care of in ACR Common. I cannot give you the exact date and how it will be implemented. We are planning to implement in such a way that facilities who have already mapped exams do not have to do anything. So we will map the common so that you can see the RPID as well as common name, and we will do it as seamlessly as possible. So that's our future plan. The next one, would you please show again how to assign one as unwanted?
We're actually running out of time, but we have recorded this webinar. So what I can do is send you the webinar and you can review it?
Yes, so we will be posting the webinar within a day to please look out. And I guess for the people, we can also send you a link to the webinar where we posted. If you register for the webinar, you will get an email of the recording of the webinar link when we post it, and you can view as many times as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. The exams shown seem very straightforward. Why are those exams not getting tagged? And that is a question from Engstrom.
Right. So the common names, again, like Deborah Pia just stated, because this is a tool that's maintained and the software is also developed by RSNA and their team, it's up to their software developers, etc., to suggest in the software itself, for the artificial intelligence to suggest an RPID, even if they are very common. So to answer your question, why? I don't know why. I would imagine it's part of the software and the software version, along with how it's been developed. But again,
and also
right?
how it is maintained,
Mm-hmm,
how it is maintained. Because I believe any software, once you develop it, you need to maintain it and update it periodically. I'm not sure how often that is being done by RSNA, and that is the reason why it's updated. So I see that I would like a recording of the webinar sent to my email, please, by Shalene, and also Hugh Finger said that I would like to review the unwanted also, the
Sure.
review of the unwanted exam. So all of you, we will send you, all the participants in this webinar, we will send you a link when we post the recording. So yeah, don't worry, you will get it. Everyone will get it.
Okay. I think that's it for now, and we're at the top of the hour, so I want to thank you very much for joining this webinar. And if you'd like to, you can sign up for the additional webinars that are to come. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so if you have any more questions, please go to nrdrsupport.acr.org. We do have a ticketing system now to better assist you and faster to respond to your questions faster. It's a website, nrdrsupport.acr.org, and you can create a ticket, and we will make sure that someone gets to your questions as soon as possible. So there is another question by Anthony Blantica. I bulk upload some mapping via Excel. Can I change suggested mapping RPID in the Excel? And it will change the suggested to the new different mapping I uploaded?
Yes, it will change it. If you're doing batch export import, yes, it will change it. But again, those changes won't be established until the following day after you've imported.
So it has a lag time. I would say about 48 hours it takes to upload it, but we have some bugs reported recently that say that even after 48 hours my exams, the changes that I made did not update. And if that is your case, or you encounter something like that, please contact us. We need to take a look at that. That is not usual. That is something that we need to fix. Also, I think we just spent all our time here. So I would thank everyone. And yes, the next webinar is a repeat, and all of this webinar, we are doing the same webinar, and there is the schedule. I think you all got the email because not everyone can attend in a specific day and time. So we are just scheduling this webinar on a regular basis so everyone can get a chance to attend the webinar at their convenience. And you are most welcome to join in the next webinar if you have time, or if you want to have more questions for us. And we will post the recording and send you an email of the link. So thank you everyone for joining, and have a great afternoon.